Alright, hi guys, my name is Jimmy Mooney, and today I'll be presenting my contemporary moral issues presentation, where I'll be looking over 3 distinct issues and 2 ethical theories to use that. To be specific, I'll be talking about intellectual property, technology surveillance, as well as misleading advertising. And the theories that I'll be using to analyze these issues are the categorical imperative and virtue ethics, which the categorical imperative is simply an ethical theory of which it's supposed to be treating people as ends opposed to means, so not manipulating them in a certain way or using them to achieve a goal, and that goal being an end, so basically not manipulating people in a way. And following what is known as universal law, which is simply an idea that you can make universal by which everyone can agree to it. So basically, it's saying it's kind of like the golden rule. So if you do something to someone else, then would you approve it if it were the other way around, essentially, is what that means. So I'll be getting into all this in a moment. So first is intellectual property. So that can just be a patent, a copyright, a trademark, trade secret within a certain company. And a specific example of this, well, at NFL teams, I put up, those are examples of trademarks, but a specific example was Apple and Microsoft had a lawsuit years ago about a certain patent on a component of software that they had. They were basically arguing who owned it, whatever. And yeah, that's just basically an example, so it can get kind of messy as to who owns what and whatever, but in some other ways it can get more complicated because there's problems with China, they're notorious for stealing IP and taking IP from Americans, and it kind of has to go with the trade war going on right now, as you all probably know, and with tariffs being a huge hot topic nowadays. So I guess in terms of universal law and categorical imperative, I guess it would say the way that would be analyzed is it can't be made universal, or it can be made universal to that people have a right to what they own, essentially. And it would be treating people as ends opposed to means if you aren't straight up stealing their intellectual property. And it wouldn't apply to virtue ethics, or Aristotle's virtue ethics, because there's no, I guess, virtue or middle ground between stealing. Stealing is just flat out wrong, I guess. So next is technology surveillance. So this is something that can be done by technology companies and or the government. So I guess a specific example, that you don't have to read the whole quote there, but basically what it's saying is that they do use it and they work hand in hand with the government, them being those technology companies, and they use it for selling data, I guess for counterterrorism efforts, especially post 9/11 via the Patriot Act. And yeah, it's basically kind of balancing those 2 things of personal privacy versus national security, because you don't want people's, I guess, privacy being infringed. Like these guys wouldn't approve of that, speaking of universal law, and it's not treating people as ends opposed to means. But the point being is that there needs to be somewhere between keeping everyone here in the US safe from terrorism, as well as respecting people's privacy. And then last but not least is misleading advertising. So this can really depend on the case and how severe it is, so to speak. So for example, there was a case with Red Bull in 2014. This might sound far-fetched, but somebody literally sued them for saying that Red Bull didn't give them wings, which it sounds ridiculous and silly, but the guy who sued them ultimately did get a pretty nice settlement of money. But that's an example of somebody who's, neither side's losing, so to speak, because the customer's happy with the product if you drink Red Bull and enjoy Red Bull, and the company's making money off of it, so both sides are winning, even though it's kind of misleading to some degree, but not really. Then there's cases like Volkswagen, who used certain software within their vehicles to manipulate emissions standards and things of that nature basically in their vehicles. They were just pumping it up and making it, just lying about it, and yeah, pumping up their numbers to make it look better. It really was. So I guess that misleading the public, depending on to what degree, would fail both components of the categorical imperative. It can't be made universal because it just straight up being dishonest, as well as it's treating people as means, not ends. And being honest about those things would be treating people as ends opposed to means. So virtue ethics, on the other hand, would just have some sort of reasonable transparency. Definitely more towards the side of transparency than the side of being dishonest. They don't have to share every little tiny thing, but they should be reasonably transparent. So the conclusion, yeah, just a categorical imperative just on those two key principles of something being a universal law and having that able to be made a universal law, as well as virtue ethics is kind of this, middle ground somewhere between two extremes with, for example, an extreme would be with honesty. So you don't have to overshare, you don't have to just, and obviously you shouldn't be just flat out lying all the time. So finding somewhere in that middle ground is what's appropriate. And to these specific issues, it kind of depends case by case and how severe it is. And here are my works cited. Thank you guys for listening, I appreciate it. And I'll thank you guys once again, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.